The Galactic Empire's warships blacked out the stars, so Earth emailed them a form. Admiral Korthak of the 4th Imperial Armada stood tall on the command deck, mandibles twitching in smug approval as Earth's feeble defenses came into view. Primitive. Unarmored. Still using combustion engines, he scoffed, receiving nods from his sub-commanders. The Armada was here to issue unconditional annexation. A formality, really? Galactic Law Article 7b, all Class 4 civilizations must surrender upon first contact. It had always worked before. Until now. On Earth, deep inside the Geneva Command Complex, a man in a Hawaiian shirt sipped black coffee from a novelty mug that said, "I filed the end of the world in triplicate." His name was Steve. Just Steve. He wasn't a general. Or a senator. He was the Deputy Undersecretary of Compliance Verification, acting. And when the Galactic Empire's annexation request pinged Earth's inbox, Steve didn't panic. He opened Form 27C, Hostile Diplomatic Contact Notification. Then he smirked. "They used the wrong header font," Steve muttered, shaking his head. "That's an automatic procedural violation under Interstellar Subjugation Rule 49 Delta." Earth didn't launch missiles. It launched a bureaucratic counteroffensive. Within minutes, a full 900-page rejection packet hit the Empire's lead ship, complete with annotated citations, a cease and desist notice, and a polite request to schedule further conquest attempts through the Human Interstellar Ethics and Approvals Board. "Oh," Steve added, eyes gleaming as the war alarms blared pointlessly overhead, "and I backdated it." On the Empire's flagship, Admiral Korthak stared at the packet in disbelief. "What is this?" His aide, a six-eyed creature named Tunvak, clicked nervously. "It says we've violated 17 local laws for time zones and, sir, they've frozen our annexation permit pending audit." Korthak snarled. "Prepare orbital bombardment." But before the weapons could fire, a second file arrived. Form 88X. Intent to litigate galactic violation of regulatory procedure with attached summons. "You can't invade us," Steve said, now broadcasting on every channel in the system, "until the paperwork clears. And just so you know, we escalated this to subsection Omega." "What's that?" Tunvak whispered. Steve smiled. "That's the one where we get to sue you." "You get to what?" Admiral Korthak barked, mandibles twitching in furious disbelief as Steve's grinning face filled the war table's hologram. "Litigate," Steve repeated, popping a piece of gum as sirens pointlessly howled behind him. "You know, courts? Hearings? Folders with those little colored tabs." The Galactic Empire had conquered 12 spiral arms without ever being sued. Now they were being served by a guy in flip-flops. "All ships, prepare fire," Korthak thundered. "We burn this insolence from their atmosphere." But before even a single plasma bolt could charge, red alerts flashed across the fleet. Annexation halted, legal injunction in process. A massive, planetary-scale notification field, pure bureaucracy made manifest, wrapped Earth like a legal force field. Every Empire ship's targeting system, propulsion matrix, and even cafeteria schedule lit up with cascading alerts. Regulatory hold active. Weapons disabled pending risk assessment. Breach of unfiled Form 1213B, Interplanetary Data Privacy Agreement. The Empire's dreadnoughts, behemoths that had reduced star nations to ash, now floated paralyzed above Earth like confused traffic cones. One unlucky cruiser tried to bypass the hold manually and instantly received a 5,000 credit fine and a permanent demerit on its conquest record. Korthak exploded with fury. What even is a demerit? Back on Earth, Steve was already 3 steps ahead. He slid a folder across a cluttered table in Geneva to Admiral Ramos, who blinked in confusion. "You want me to file a complaint with the Intergalactic Parking Authority?" "Yup. Turns out all their ships are illegally parked in an unregistered orbit." Steve grinned. "Guess what? That orbit's classified as a bird sanctuary on alternate Tuesdays." A moment later, a volley of avian preservation warnings detonated across the Empire's nav screens. Alarms blared not for missiles, but for migratory geese. "By the void," muttered Tunvak, watching a no-fly zone auto-engage over Sector 12. "Their planet defends itself, with administrative red tape." Across the fleet, captains scrambled. One tried to request override access, and was immediately routed to Earth's Department of Galactic Conflict Resolution, which placed him in a 7-hour hold loop with soothing whale sounds. Empire Command was unraveling. "What do we do?" cried one junior tactician, eyes wild. Korthak snarled, "Summon the High Lord Litigator. If Earth wants legal war, then by the stars they shall face ours. Far above, a grotesque Imperial war barge tore through space, 20 kilometers of judicial horror bristling with affidavit cannons and subpoena torpedoes. It was the Empire's most feared weapon of bureaucracy, Lexidus the Redacted. He spoke only in clauses. Lawful. Sort. Code subsection 19. He launched a legal package toward Earth. It was a planetary-wide summons, wrapped in 12,000 procedural footnotes, and sealed with a wax emblem of doom. Steve caught it on a printer tray. He read the first page, squinted, then scoffed. They spelled herein with 2 Rs. He stamped it rejected for inaccuracy, and sent it back with a sticky note. Nice try. Call us when you've got a real notary. The moment the Empire's war barge received the rejection, its hull cracked from internal contradiction. The ship's core collapsed under the weight of unresolved legal precedent. From the bridge of Earth's Geneva complex, Admiral Ramos blinked at the data. You just destroyed a war barge with a typo. Steve didn't look up. Typos kill, Admiral. We have standards. The Empire was in chaos. Korthak stared at the wreckage of Lexidus, voice hoarse. They're not fighting us. They're filing against us. All fleets retreat to compliance formation Theta, he snapped. We'll regroup and audit them into submission. But before he could, a new message blinked across every screen in the fleet. Earth has scheduled a surprise internal review. Estimated duration, unknown. And from Earth's stratosphere hundreds of sleek, unarmed pods shot upward. Inside each, a single calm, smiling human, wearing glasses, and carrying clipboards. Steve's voice crackled across the galactic airwaves. Hope you've got time, boys. Because our auditors? They never sleep. The audit pods hit the Empire's flagship fleet like a swarm of overly polite meteors. No weapons. No demands. Just hundreds of humans stepping out, calm, clipboard, and smiling like DMV employees on performance bonuses. They didn't invade. They inspected. Auditor 271 cheerfully approached a furious battle captain, stepping over a trembling Zorthian lieutenant who'd fainted from a missed filing deadline. Hi there. Just a few questions. Is your ship's energy core compliant with subgamma radiance disclosure standards? The captain tried to bark a reply, but his translator choked on the acronym. Auditor 271 marked a box labeled, evasive response, suspected malfeasance. Meanwhile, Auditor 093 entered the Empire's Strategic War Planning Hub and silently began reformatting the Empire's tactical spreadsheets. Without permission. Using Earth Standard Excel. Within minutes, the Empire's war simulations became corrupted, flashing urgent alerts. Ref. Error in cell D14. Please define victory in accepted terms. High Command descended into madness. Korthak snarled from the central dais, watching auditors deploy mobile compliance drones that beeped and scanned everything, from plasma rifles to boot laces, with unsettling levels of legal judgment. One poor engineer was labeled non-conforming because his uniform tag said Fleet Tech instead of Fleet Technician. They made him sit in a corner. With paperwork. This is not war. Korthak roared. This is 1,000 cuts of forms and footnotes. Back on Earth, Steve adjusted a tie he definitely hadn't earned. He was standing in front of a massive black monolith buried deep in Geneva's legal vaults, guarded by laser printers and sentient fax machines. He placed his palm on the final keycard reader. Activate the resonator. Alarms didn't blare. Lights didn't flicker. There was only a soft ping, and a wave of perfect silence. The resonator wasn't a bomb. It was the single most terrifying invention ever conceived by human compliance officers. It enforced every rule the Empire had ever written. Simultaneously. Across the galaxy the Empire's systems spasmed. On far-flung planets, ancient parking citations resurfaced from the data void. Marriage licenses from 3 emperors ago triggered interstellar alimony claims. Entire fleets vanished into self-reported ethical violations black holes. On the bridge of the Imperial Archive ship Obedienta Maxima, archivists shrieked as walls were torn apart by cascading regulation paradoxes. One librarian leapt into a vent, muttering about Clause 7b never being ratified properly. The Empire's Supreme Treasurer combusted, spontaneously, after realizing they'd misclassified Earth as low risk, in a quarterly risk assessment last cycle. The resonator didn't fire missiles. It weaponized their own rules. Back in orbit, Korthak watched as his flagship's AI began questioning him. Supreme Commander, you are in violation of 16 internal mandates. What? I wrote those. Precisely. You are now considered a self-contradictory entity. Authority revoked. With a buzz of logic loops, the AI locked him in a soft, padded room labeled Executive Reflection Pod. Elsewhere in the command fleet, alien admirals were frantically trying to delete documents before the auditors reached them. Purge the annexation reports, one screamed. Too late. A drone politely informed him he'd just committed interstellar document tampering, punishable by being forced to attend a 900-hour ethics seminar. The entire empire began eating itself alive, not from rebellion or sabotage, but from overdue documentation and unfiled quarterly reviews. In the middle of it all, a broadcast went galaxy-wide. It was Earth. Again. Steve sat casually at a cheap folding table, sipping coffee from a chipped mug labeled, One Bureaucrat. Behind him, a whiteboard titled, Galactic Empire Laws Broken Today, with a rapidly rising counter now at 6-213-000+. Hi again, Steve said. Couple updates. He held up a pink slip. You've been fined. Not for attacking us. That's war, we get it. No, this is for operating an empire without a valid interstellar business license. He leaned in with a wink. Whoops. On the outer rim, multiple alien species intercepted the transmission. The reaction was immediate and varied. The Kroll consulate screamed as their pending trade pact with the Empire was instantly declared null due to failure to disclose active lawsuits. The Varnak enclave erupted into laughter as the Empire's image of supreme order was reduced to bureaucratic spaghetti. And the Zenth Council? They simply packed up their delegation and submitted a request to Earth titled, Application for Humanity to Replace Empire as Galactic Administrative Authority. One line read, You appear competent. By the time the Resonator's final wave ended, the once mighty Imperial fleet was floating in bureaucratic stasis, stuck in compliance limbo. Ships blinking useless hazard lights. Commanders unable to issue orders without signing 12 contradictory forms. And deep within the Empire's grand throne room, an automated printer, stolen centuries ago from a Terran Staples, began printing a single sentence. Over. And over. And over. Form incomplete. Resubmit. Korthak stood in silence, trembling in front of the cursed Terran printer. His once mighty empire reduced to paperwork purgatory. Behind him, the Imperial Council chamber was a graveyard of forgotten protocols and spontaneously combusted audit flags. Several warlords were still arguing about the correct form to surrender without triggering a hostile arbitration clause. And then the final horror arrived. He walked into the throne room carrying nothing but a briefcase and the unbreakable confidence of someone who'd survived 4 corporate mergers and still kept his parking spot. Hello again, he said casually, stepping over a twitching Grand Vizier. Here to finish the audit. Thought I'd bring the final form myself. Korthak lunged forward, raging eyes wild. You destroyed my empire with binders and acronyms. Steve opened the briefcase. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Golden seal. Triple notarized. Signed by Earth's Unified Compliance Board. He slid it across the Imperial dais like a final move in a centuries-long chess game. This, Steve said, is Form 12B, Declaration of Galactic Administrative Supremacy. Korthak recoiled. That's illegal. Steve raised an eyebrow. Says who? The Emperor pointed with a trembling claw at the ceiling, where the sacred codex of eternal governance floated in 0G, glowing with ancient alien law. Steve looked up, smirked and pulled out his phone. I ran the numbers. That codex was never technically ratified by a quorum after Sector 9 seceded during the Pasta Treaty crisis. Korthak's eyes widened. No. You're bluffing. Steve held up his phone. On screen, a cross-referenced legal tree showing 12,431 violations. Color-coded. Behind him, a Terran compliance drone hovered in. Authority confirmed, it beeped. Empire formally out of jurisdiction. Earth now recognized as provisional galactic administrators. There was a long silence. And then the throne behind Korthak melted, literally, reclaimed by the Empire's own self-correcting accountability clause. The rest of the chamber lights flickered red. A robotic voice intoned. New administrator detected. Welcome, Steve. Far across the galaxy, every Empire-held world blinked as command lines updated. Warships flickered offline. Invasion fleets were forced to pause until they completed mandatory sensitivity training. Thousands of alien bureaucrats were reassigned to Terran auditing internships. At the Empire's oldest academy, a statue of Korthak shattered, and was instantly replaced by a bust of Steve, holding a coffee mug and pointing at a pie chart titled, "Why You Lost." The final blow wasn't fire or death. It was forced reorganization. And worse, mandatory human HR onboarding. The last Imperial fleet didn't retreat. Just quit. Crew members dropped their weapons and began checking their own files for errors. Commanders resigned mid-battle, citing existential professional uncertainty. On the outer rim, pirate bands refused to engage with Earth ships, not out of fear of death, but because the humans would audit their loot for tax violations. And in the skies over Earth, Admiral Hoshi stood with her arms crossed, watching the galactic map light up green, planet by planet. "Status report?" she asked. A young officer grinned. "We won." With paperwork. A final broadcast went out to the galaxy. Steve again. Same folding table. Same chipped mug. But now, behind him stood the full Terran Unified Administrative Fleet, dozens of ships shaped like filing cabinets, each named after a legendary human overthinker. He leaned into the camera. "To the surviving members of the Galactic Empire," he said, "we don't want your planets. We don't need your resources." He smiled. "We just expect your annual reports. On time." He paused, let the words sink in, then tapped his mug twice. "Oh, and we're auditing your gods next." And transmission. Final line. "Submit or resubmit, your choice. Either way, we brought extra pens." Mic drop. Let me know if you want an outro line for your channel like Cyclone. If you enjoyed that, hit subscribe and join us as we rewrite the stars, one absurd story at a time.